Scott Jensen is joining us. I love in the background, we've got
the bureaucrats and some of the politicians might have us think exists. It doesn't exist so much when you just talk to regular folks. I don't care if I'm meeting in North Minneapolis with folks, or in Sleepy Eye where I grew up, or Waconia, Chaska where I live now, or in Moorhead. Parents want opportunities for their kids to match up with their kids' skills. There's no set of parents out there that want to be satisfied with their child not being able to learn optimally or dream dreams and go pursue their dreams. So I think the notion of school choice and not funding broken institutions, but instead funding kids, this is what's resonating with Minnesotans across the state. Safety, I think people recognize the fact that we shouldn't have to worry about stray bullets and our kids in the front yard playing. I think we'd all like to be able to enter neighborhoods, walk to the grocery store, maybe walk to church. I think that we all can recognize that we need to recognize how difficult police work is. And while everybody is able to make a mistake, doctors, teachers, police, anybody, we need to appreciate the work they do, recognize that they never know what they're going to encounter. Incarceration has to be a deterrent, so people don't somehow think that they can do whatever they want, particularly felons that are intent on hurting people. These are the things that people want across Minnesota. They want the same things. And I think there's this tremendous drive right now. People want to know that our election process is trustworthy. They're just frustrated that they can't necessarily buy into the idea that everything's okay. And it really isn't just Republicans or Democrats, it's both. You can go back the last couple of decades and look at what's happened, and both parties have been frustrated. There's plenty of shenanigans to go around. I think, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what the polling numbers show, but I think it's something like 70% of people want some sort of voter ID because they want to make it easy to vote but hard to cheat. And I would add one thing. If you're going to try to cheat and you get caught, let's have you spend some time in jail so you think about it before you do it twice. I think that's what people are asking for.
That's what really jumped out to me tonight when you mentioned, hey, one of the things that you're getting a lot of feedback on from the people in Minnesota is election integrity. So I'm going to get to more of that in a moment, but just to set some context, because there have been a lot of people tuning in, so thank you everybody that's tuning into this Facebook Live. You said you spoke to one of the members from Maricopa County. I don't remember if it was an auditor or a state senator, but they shared some pretty shocking numbers with you. If you can share with our audience what you found out about Maricopa County.
Well, Maricopa County is where Phoenix is located, and you're talking millions of people. This was a boots on the ground person named Alicia. She participated in the nuts and bolts of the forensic audit. She gave me reams of data. And I said, tell me two things that jump out at you. She said, well, the good news was only 282 dead people voted. And I said, that's the good news? And she said, yeah, we thought it might be worse. The other thing she told me was in regards to the mail-in ballots, there were 9,000 more ballots returned than had been mailed out. That's a problem. I don't care where you sit on the political spectrum. If we're using mail-in ballots and we're getting more back than we sent out, and that's what they had identified in Maricopa County, that's what she shared with me. There was also other concerns about the number of people that did not have proper, and she used the term provenance, which evidently has to do with whether or not your correct address is there, whether or not you might have moved, who lives at that location now, and these kinds of nuts and bolts thing. But the thing that really struck me was 282 dead people vote and 9,000 more votes are mailed back.
So how does that happen?
Well, I know once I had a patient who told me that he voted for his dad who had died. And what had happened, they got a ballot at home. And it's probably, I don't know, a week or two or three before the election. And his dad had passed. And his dad had pretty strong political feelings. And I don't know, this patient went ahead and filled out the ballot and mailed it back in. I told him I don't think he should do that again. But yeah, I think that's what happens. I think people do that. I'm not sure exactly how the mechanism is for each time, but I'm certain that it does happen. So
You're the first person that told me there's been over 9,000 extra mail-in ballots in Maricopa County. I don't think Joe Biden, quote unquote, won Arizona by much more than what, 10, 11, 12,000 votes, was it?
it was tight. It was. But I think the take home message is there's plenty there that we don't need to be calling one another names or calling people conspiracy theorists because they have concerns. I think we can say, listen, in 2004, Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic candidate for governor in Virginia, as we speak, Terry McAuliffe tells the DNC that they stole the last election, referring to President George W. Bush winning over Al Gore. Fact of the matter is, that was what a Democrat said in 2004. So these kinds of words, these kinds of concerns have been present before. So why don't we stop bickering about it and let's just fix it? Let's just do voter ID. Lots of states use some form of voter ID, I think more than half. If we have questions, let's use provisional ballots. I think 47 states use that. Why would we want to do something that would undercut one of the pillars of our democracy?
So people are going to say that you're going to suppress the vote. Before you answer that, I don't know if you're aware, but in 2018, North Dakota voter ID, everyone suggested that was going to suppress Native American vote. We actually saw the highest Native American turnout in the history of the state. So will you speak to that, please?
I've seen similar data. I think this is what political types do. They usually take an approach where the chicken little approach, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. The fact of the matter is, you'll find often that you get exactly the opposite. I don't think people on an individual basis, for the most part, they're not interested in cheating. They would like to have a legal system. And I think if we really put it in place, I think we might get more voter turnout than ever before.
So real quickly, because Carol here, and folks, if you want to ask questions, please do so. But Carol's saying, hey, we need to stop Dominion quickly because I want to move on to some other topics. But if you're elected governor, what would you do to ensure election integrity? Would you get rid of Dominion machines here? Would you have voter ID? What kind of things would you do?
Well, this is interesting because the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, they printed an AP article in the middle of August. And it talked about the fact that there's a gentleman named Halderman, I believe from Michigan, who's an election securities expert. And there was another fellow as well. And this was in the Star Tribune, Associated Press article. And they talked about the fact that these tabulating machines are, if you will, vulnerable. And they specifically talked about the fact that the amount of time it takes for malware to be implanted into some of these machines was really quite short. I was surprised that the Strib printed the article because it really gave credence to the notion that there are concerns about the machines. And in that specific situation, I think they referenced the Dominion machines. So I would ask this. I would want to work with the Secretary of State and say, listen, let's do whatever it takes to make certain that all Minnesotans are comfortable with the process. Let's not do that political game. That's what I would do. I'd work with others and get the thing solved. But I think key pieces are going to be voter ID and provisional ballots.
Quickly, yes or no, because people are asking here, do you think there was fraud in Minnesota in 2020?
At some level, I think there were shenanigans. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to the big story also that you and I have talked about, Dr. Jeffrey Horek, working at Lake Region Healthcare. He is a surgeon, so he clearly understands the science of masks because he wears them when he does surgery. Spoke up at a school board meeting. I'm sure you're well aware of the National School Board Association suggesting that parents are domestic terrorists that are speaking out, threatening things. AG Merrick Garland sort of backs up that letter. Bottom line is this doctor speaks out about, hey, it should be a parent's choice in regards to masks. He's now terminated at Lake Region Healthcare. Just your reaction to what happened with this situation.
2 words: nauseated and furious. This reminds me of what Martin Niemöller said in 1946 after World War II. And I'm not going to specifically say his words correctly, but he wrote sort of a short, brief essay saying they came for the trade unionists and I didn't protest because I wasn't a trade unionist. They came for this group, and I didn't protest because I wasn't in that group. They came for the Jews, and I didn't protest because I wasn't a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one there to speak for me. I think every American should shiver to the bone. When you have someone who's been on call all night, taking care of someone's appendicitis, another person's bleeding ulcer, when you have someone serving your community for 15 to 20 years, giving that community the best years of their surgical career, potentially, and they are canceled because they have a different opinion on masks. Chris, you can look at the physics of a mask, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you've got a cotton or a surgical mask that has a pore 5 microns in size and a COVID particle is 1/50th of that, how can you possibly think that that mask will stop viral particle transmission? No, certainly there might be some mitigation. I mean, there is a lattice structure to a mask, so some viral particles will collide with that lattice structure. And there are some studies that have indicated maybe 9 to 11% filtration efficiency ratio, which would indicate that you can filter efficiently 11%. But there have been studies in Denmark and a variety of places. And if you look at some of the meta-analyses, if you tell someone that if they wear a cotton or surgical mask, they will prevent themselves from getting COVID-19, you are lying to them. You are endangering their life. You may think that you're real clever, but seriously, we have seen this over and over again across the globe. Masks do not prevent you from getting COVID. They may reduce your chance. How do you prove that? It's one of those questions. But we do know, we can prove that you can wear a mask every second if you want, and you can still pick up the disease. So if you think you're being some hoity-toity, highfalutin, bureaucratic public health person, and you tell someone, wear a mask and you won't get the disease, you could be killing grandma.
Thank you, everybody that's tuning in. Great audience here, so we appreciate the questions and comments. So take us behind the scenes here, Dr. Jensen, because you understand the healthcare system. I know you don't know this, but based on your experience and education, what do you believe the message is that Lake Region Healthcare is trying to say to Dr. Horick and others by essentially terminating him because he simply spoke about science at a school board meeting?
Well, there are two things that come to my mind. One is the notion that a highly regarded contributing citizen to Fergus Falls is now basically being challenged to find a way to stay living in Fergus Falls. A smaller group of people are saying, we have the power to cancel you, to shut you down, and we're going to use it, do it. And the easiest thing for us would be if you would just leave our sphere of existence. That's chilling. But there's another piece going on, and this worries me too. What if the whole motivation? I don't know Dr. Horick. I've had a chance to converse with him. I did some research on him. Sounds like an outstanding surgeon. I had a chance to chat with his wife. But what if along the way he's ruffled feathers? What if he disagreed with someone's recommendation that we should treat all patients with elevated cholesterol with Lipitor, even if they're 95 years old? What if he, along the way, has been a bit of a contrarian? Solid surgeon, outstanding physician, but he expresses his own viewpoint. What if along the way, he's rubbed some people the wrong way, and this instance was used as a tool to get rid of him? I mean, I think we're seeing that kind of behavior take place in a variety of settings. So it's not even the proclaimed transgression that's necessarily causing this to happen. It could be something far more Machiavellian, something far more dastardly human, like a grudge.
But the saddest thing is that is Lake Region serving their patients, putting their best interest of their patients in mind and the community by removing this doctor from this healthcare system.
Well, several things jump out at me there. Certainly, and I don't know their healthcare setup, their system, but you are going to lose credibility. You have to. You have, I'm going to guess, thousands of people who have been served by this man in a surgical physician capacity. And you're saying that all that excellent service is for naught because he dared to say something contrary. In that
Can we
situation,
pause for a minute, sir?
Sure.
Because yes, it's contrarian, but he's talking about science, right? I mean, so that's where I think people are having this mind meld going, this is a doctor, right? The day I did my show, I played a preschool teacher making a song with kids going, I wear a mask, you, like, that teacher probably got a promotion for all you know, but there's no science that conclusively shows the masks are actually protecting these kids. Here a doctor stands up, talks about science, and now he's terminated.
that would specifically beef up what I'm saying, that this will cause a fracture of trust. Lake regions will lose trust with many people in the community. And when you do this once, people don't know why you wouldn't do it twice. And I think we're going to see that. We saw that a little bit with when President Trump said, we've got this vaccine program on warp speed. People came out and said, who would take the vaccine? I won't take that vaccine. We had Biden saying it. We had Kamala Harris saying, we had all these people saying. Then the vaccine comes to fruition. Boom. Now, greatest thing since sliced bread. When you do these kinds of things, people aren't stupid. They're watching and they remember. Frankly, that's a big part of the reason why we're in the conundrum we're in right now with this COVID pandemic is public health officials have fractured the trust. We've had Tony Fauci sound more like an auctioneer than he has a scientist. 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85. We don't know where the number is for herd immunity. And then when he's confronted on it, he said, well, I didn't think that people could handle the truth. Now it sounds like he's watching reruns of old movies. I mean, so that's one thing that jumps out at me, what happened with Lake Regions and Dr. Hort. Another thing is going to be, what are they saying to all the employees that remain? Are they saying, you better watch your P's and Q's? You speak against us, we'll have to send you to the re-education camp? Doesn't this sound like George Orwell? Doesn't this sound like exactly what we've heard before? I remember, Chris, Rush Limbaugh came to my defense on a program of his maybe a year ago. And I remember he jokingly said, yeah, they're going to send this Dr. Jensen from Chaska to the re-education camp. That's what it feels like. But Dr. Horrock's not there. They can't send them to the re-education camp, but they can send everybody else there.
It's chilling. Again, thank you everybody that's tuning in. For everybody that is just tuning in, if you're in the Fergus Falls community, Dr. Jensen will be there tomorrow for a Fight for Freedom rally for Dr. Horrock. So please go attend that. It'll be nearby the Lake Region Healthcare Center. So again, if you're in the Fergus Falls community, go out, meet Dr. Jensen face to face, and take a stand for freedom with Dr. Horrock as well. A couple things that jumped out. One of these questions was on Facebook here. I haven't seen this, but someone suggested that Representative Eric Mortensen out of Minnesota says that your health freedom amendment, if you can explain, number one, what is the health freedom amendment that you're suggesting? And he's saying,
But the big pieces were no masks for kids, no vaccine mandates, no vaccine passports. His bill was lengthier, And I think on page 5, his bill really came to the focus. The bill that I had written was very short, 1 page really, maybe a page and a half. But a shorter bill has an easier potential to be flipped into an amendment, so that if Governor Walz were to call a special session in order to, if you will, distribute the $250 million to hero pay, I think I liked the bill that some of my colleagues had written for me, or at my request. They'll be carrying it, obviously I'm not. I liked it because it was brief, it was to the point, but it may not do all that we want it to do, but it may be the conversation starter. So I think Representative Mortensen may well be correct that his bill with more detail might more precisely focus on that specific area he's addressed. I think the bill that I had asked to be written was a little more general in nature, focusing on this concept of health freedom sanctuary state. And in so doing, it may well be that the best answer might be to take his bill and my bill, and maybe we take a couple pieces of mine and put it onto his, or vice versa. Doesn't matter, because when you've got similar ideas going forward, I think the most important thing is let's get it done. Let's just keep pushing this concept forward. And the fact of the matter is, both bills have similar thrusts. No more vaccine passports, no more vaccine mandates. I don't care who gets credit for whatever. It doesn't matter to me at all. I just know that his bill, when I looked it over, had a little different shape than what I thought I wanted to move forward. And so that's why we went that way. I think some people have tried to make a to-do about that, but it isn't. These are just similar ideas. Let's move them forward because they matter.
Tonight you said there'll be no vaccine mandates even for private employers. And you explained why. Some people are going to say, whoa, wait a second. Conservative, Republican, now you're going to be telling private businesses what to do? What say you?
That's a great question. And I have a legitimate disagreement with some of my colleagues. I think that if you hire someone and you don't have it in their job description, that they may be forced to take a vaccine they don't want to take, and you have that person work with you for 5, 10, 20 years, and then you decide, oh, by the way, we're going to start having, you have to take influenza vaccines, even though they only work 10, 20, 40, 50% of the time, you got to take one. Well, wouldn't that be an easy way for an employer to sort of cut off the top wage earners, the people that have been there the longest? I mean, I just don't think that's right. If that's what being a Republican's about, then count me out. Because quite frankly, I stand with the employee here. If you want to tell someone that they have to take a vaccine, you do that when you hire them. And if you want to do it at some other time, I think from a legal perspective, you might have to give them some kind of consideration. And that kind of process does indeed take place in, if you will, the employment world, where sometimes someone might concede or sign something additional that they didn't sign when they first started working because they received some significant consideration. But no, I don't think an employee should be forced to take a vaccine that they've never had to do before, especially when you look at a vaccine that has, as, if you will, tainted a story. I mean, this is not stopping you from getting the disease or from transmitting the disease or having a viral load in your pharynx. It's not stopping you from the possibility of hospitalization or death. It went from an EUA to approval in a time frame that is pretty unusual. So I'm not quibbling about this. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think the vaccine is a game changer in some ways because it does take people that are, if you will, vulnerable and reduces their risk significantly of hospitalization or death. And I'm pleased for that. But let's be clear on this. Let's not dig in so much that we're not able to understand or appreciate where the other person's coming from. I've got a couple of employees in my clinic that have given me their best employee years. And I'll be damned if I'm going to go to them and say, you violate your core convictions or I'm going to fire you. If I wanted to do that, I should have had them sign that when I hired them originally, and they would know what they were going to do. Let me give you an example. If you're going to be working in a ward that takes care of kids that have all come off of a, if you will, a bone marrow transplant, I could see where you'd want every one of your employees to have every vaccine known to man that might help improve the people, the patients that you'd be caring for. I get that. Then have that in the job description at the front end.
Thanks again, everybody that's tuning in. Again, Dr. Scott Jensen joining us here, running for governor for the great state of Minnesota. There's a couple things you said earlier tonight, Doc, that I want to jump into. Before I do, because you really were like, I was like, wow, I didn't know that. What is the most, maybe egregious thing is the right word, the most egregious thing or the most important thing that people should know about COVID and or the vaccines that they don't, based on what you know?
Well, I'm going to take your egregious question and say remarkable, because I'm going to go on both sides of it. One positive, one negative. I'd say this. If you're vulnerable and you haven't had the disease and recovered from it on your own, if you have, say you're 75 years old, you have multiple underlying conditions, you're vulnerable. If you get COVID, arguably, you have a 1 in 20 chance of dying. And 95% of those people will recover, 5% won't. That's a big deal. If you take a vaccine, it's not going to do all that we had hoped it would do. But the chances of dying from the vaccine are arguably 1 in 25,000. You can move those numbers around quite a bit, but the bottom line is 1 out of 20, 1 out of 25,000. You can see where that vaccine is a game changer for the vulnerable. That's the one thing. The most egregious thing for me is, as a doctor who has for 30 years relied on the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, the VAERS program, which is run by the CDC. If in the 1990s we used that to inform us that the Lyme vaccine was not working, so it was withdrawn from the market. If it was the VAERS data that showed us that the rotavirus vaccine was killing children with intussusception and bowel obstruction, so that it was withdrawn from the market, then that same program, when it has shown us this time around with COVID-19 that we have had far more deaths related time-wise to the administration of the vaccine than all the other vaccines combined over the last 30 years. The CDC runs a program. Some 15,000 deaths have been related from a time perspective. The CDC, by its own acknowledgement, has indicated that some 20 to 30% of those deaths occurred within 48 hours of the administration of the vaccine. Well, let's just say it's 20% of 15,000. That's 3,000 people died within 48 hours of the vaccine. Well, I don't know how other doctors do it, but when I'm going to give a vaccine to a person or make the order, if they look like they're on deathbed, if they look like they're going to be dead in 48 hours, I'm not going to vaccinate them. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to give someone a tetanus shot if I think they're going to die of their stage 4 colon cancer in the next day or two. So what is the likelihood that those 3,000 people died of something entirely unrelated to the COVID vaccine? I just can't get my arms around that. To me, the number of people, 20%, 3,000 people within 48 hours of getting that vaccine. Now, that's reports that I have read from the CDC data. That's astonishing to me. And we're going to say that that data doesn't count. That we're going to tell the American public, hey, there's no reason to be concerned. There's no problem with this vaccine. We had the European Parliament come out over the last 2 or 3 days, say they're opposed to the vaccine mandates. We had multiple European countries in the last 2 weeks say they're pressing pause on vaccinating young people. I think one country said 30 and under, another country said 18 and under, because of the myocarditis concern. The myocarditis concern really sort of exposed itself in early May of this year, I think, with the Israel data. But the bottom line is, when you have these so-called experts acting like this data isn't there, this is where you're losing the American people. If you're wondering why Tony Fauci can't get his whole department vaccinated, it's because they're not buying what he's selling. Because they've seen what he's tried to sell, and they said, you didn't answer me correctly before. You told me don't wear a mask. Then you told me to wear a mask. You told me 60% herd immunity. Then you told me it was 80%. So, you keep moving the goalposts.
But what's behind this? That's what people want to know. When you say, hey, Chris, 10 years ago we looked at VAERS, now we're not. Why are we not looking at VAERS now when the numbers are dramatically higher from death rates? What's behind this that's driving this?
I guess that's the $1 million question. And
is it big pharma and stock prices?
I'm not willing to go down that rabbit hole, Chris. I would say this. I think if Americans and frankly the whole world, if we're not looking at the world through a lens that includes where's big pharma in this, where's big government in this, where's big tech in this, because that triad, big pharma, big government, big tech, is controlling our lives in many ways. And it's an incestuous relationship. Make no mistake about that. But in terms of that underlying motivation, you can go into some pretty dark places there. And I try not to. I know I'm guilty of making mistakes in that, but I try not to identify someone else's motivation. I just as soon have them answer for themselves. And if someone wants to try to tell me what my motivation is for something, I just as soon if they'd ask me.
What do you say to the fact that this data, and I didn't get it confirmed 1,000%, so if I'm wrong, please correct me, but there was some recent data from COVID Clarity. They do a great job on Twitter following Minnesota data. They said that in the last 28 days, 38% of the COVID deaths were of people that were fully vaccinated. What does that tell you?
Well, whether that data is precisely correct or not almost doesn't matter, because that data is not surprising alongside of many of the other data values that we've been identified or reported. So let's just take the broad view of that. We've got fully vaccinated people accounting for a significant chunk of new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. I don't think we need to quibble about the numbers. I think we can acknowledge openly that the vaccine isn't doing what we had been led to hope for. If you can't acknowledge that, then I don't see how you sleep at night. Because the fact of the matter is, I think we had the President of the United States a few months ago say, hurrah, the vaccine's here, we won, we don't have to have a mask mandate anymore, we can start living life normally. So then, here we are. It hasn't turned out the way we were told. Now we're said to, got to get a booster, and there might be another booster. But then in that same context, these same people are telling us, oh boy, everybody's gathering on a Saturday afternoon football game. Everybody's gathering at Sturgis. Everybody's gathering at the Minnesota State Fair. We're going to have these super spreader events. You know what? When Chicken Little keeps hollering that the sky is falling and the sky doesn't fall, after a while, we just ignore you. We're not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm just telling you, when you talk like that, you couldn't convince an 8-year-old.
But here's what I want to get at. You're saying, Chris, let's not quibble about the numbers. I'm going to guess, Doc, that 99% of the people on this Facebook Live right now, which, by the way, thank you for joining us, would be stunned that 38% of the deaths in the last 28 days by COVID were fully vaccinated. Do you concur with that?
But I think there's something, to be intellectually honest on this, Chris, we have to also say, if that group of people that we're looking at that have 38% are fully vaccinated, if the population was virtually completely fully vaccinated, you would have a big number that would be, any deaths. So say that you have 1,000 people and 950 of them are fully vaccinated, then you can see where that number of deaths, even if it's very small, would seem to be from fully vaccinated people, because that's the only people that could die. So I think we have to be honest that way too.
Which is fair, and that's just what I'm trying to get at. Honesty is what I want. My point to you is I think that number would shock a lot of people. If you were governor, would you command that your Department of Health sent out, because I haven't seen any news from the Walz administration or the Department of Health in a tweet, social media post, or anything saying, hey, just want you to know, I know we said this vaccine was going to help reduce death rates. We just said 38%. Would you encourage that kind of transparency?
I would, and let me take a roundabout way of answering that question. When I started a clinic 20 years ago, I said to myself, we are going to create a culture in this organization that if you make a mess up, you make a mistake, you just own it and move on. I don't think that politicians do that. I don't think that career politicians are serving us well in that regard. We should just acknowledge it. Let me give you an example. A year ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said, COVID-19 came from a natural reassortment of RNA, probably involving some sort of mammal, a bat, and a human. I don't think that anymore. I was wrong. I think we have to be more forthright. I don't think the Department of Health does themselves any good when they hide. We have seen them re-script the way they share the data with us. I remember when they used to have the 7-day trailing average. We were watching the 7-day trailing average. thousands of Minnesotans. The data started looking better and better. What they do, they took it off and says, oh, we don't think that serves you anymore. I remember when they used to tell us how many hospital beds in Minnesota were occupied by COVID patients at the given point in time. What was the hospital census in the hospital and in the ICU? They took that off. They said, no, we're not going to. They say 95% of our ICU beds are being occupied by COVID patients and unrelated patients. Well, everybody's got to be either a COVID patient or an unrelated patient. Come on, I'm not stupid. When you do this kind of thing, when the Department of Health puts it this way, and when the media reports it this way, you have to own it. You are undercutting the trust. You are basically telling Minnesotans, you must be dumber than a rock, because if we can pull this off on you. These people have done this over and over again, Chris, and it makes me say, I want to find a source that I can trust. I don't know where to find that.
So this is coming up a lot, Doc, and I'll ask it this way. Dr. Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA technology, not the mRNA vaccine, just so people are aware, but the technology of mRNA, did a LinkedIn Live, and he said, and I want to see if you agree with him, that the actual super spreaders, because they think they're healthy, are the vaccinated, not the unvaccinated. Is that true based on science?
I don't think we can say that's true or false. I think it's a notion that has to be entertained. I certainly couldn't answer that question as a yes or no, but I do think that if you look at other diseases, who are the problems? Let's just say you've got someone walking around with mono and they don't think they have it. So they share a can of pop. Maybe they kiss a few people. Maybe they spew a couple of wet sneezes on someone. And they do it because they didn't think they had mono. They just thought they were a little tired. How'd that work out? So I think that Dr. Malone is getting at that point that if you have people that are fully vaccinated and perhaps overly confident of their status, it's conceivable that they could actually be, if you will, the vector for spreading this disease.
Here's a question I have to ask you, because nobody's been able to answer this simply and calmly to me. And so I'm going to ask you, because you have a very calm demeanor and you're a doctor. If I'm vaccinated, I took that vaccine for a reason. So if I took the vaccine and I'm vaccinated, I took it because I believe I was going to be protected. So why do I care if you're not vaccinated and I am? Why should I care if you're not?
Well, I think that's a remarkable situation that we're in. Let's just take a vaccine like tetanus. When we get vaccinated against tetanus, what we're doing is we're being given a toxoid. We create an antibody to that, so that if the Clostridia tetani, if that toxin ever gets into a dirty, rusty barbed wire fence, we have antibodies immediately responding to the situation and preventing us from getting the disease. We don't have partial lockjaw. We don't get the disease. That's why we do it. Now we look at COVID. We had this mindset that this is what would happen. And so many people said, yes, I will take the vaccine. Not because I'm worried about COVID-19, not because I'm at high risk, because I'm at incredibly low risk. I'll take it because I'm being bullied and I'm being pushed and I'm being forced, and it's basically an a de facto mandate. So they take it. And then they find out that, gee, they can still get it. They can still transmit it. They can still harbor the virus in their nasopharynx. Now let's take that same person and they're saying, you know what? You got to get a booster. Why is that? Because you're not protected. Well, I took my 2 shots. Yeah, but they didn't work. Well, why don't you do whatever you want to take care of you? But I've had enough. I think that it did work. But if I do a booster, what's to make certain that you're not going to ask me to do a 4th and a 5th and a 6th and maybe every 3 months or every 12 months? And frankly, I don't want to live my life that way. So I think that we are really at an illogical spot here where people are trying to force someone else to take a vaccine that didn't work for them. Because it didn't work for them, they want you to take this unsuccessful vaccine. on the hopes that somehow, if you take it, you might be slightly less a threat to them. It's a bizarre. I mean, it smacks of Who's on First by Abbott and Costello, and we all know that. We all feel that.
And people here are saying, and I agree with them, that's where the money rolls in, right? So let's move on to, you said something tonight that shocked me. Unless you want to comment on the big pharma money, please do. But one of the things you said to me, and this may give you a lead in to say this, is you said tonight that, I think it was in March of 2020 or around then, Governor Walz told his hospitals or the Department of Health not to prescribe hydroxychloroquine. And then later he said, oh, it's okay to do that. Or can you tell us that story again? And what was the purpose behind that?
I don't know the purpose, because that would have to be a question for Governor Walz. But in late March, I believe it was March 24th or thereabouts in 2020, as a part of an emergency executive order, Governor Walz advised the Board of Pharmacy to advise pharmacies not to dispense hydroxychloroquine prescribed by physicians. That was removed about 4 months later in August, 4 or 5 months later, August 12th, I think. That was right around the same time we had another special session. And I know that Governor Walz had, in that time frame approximately, a press conference. Never brought up. So arguably from April, May, June, July, our first surge, our first wave, if patients wanted to be able to confer with their doctors and mutually put together a plan on how to treat that COVID-19, if that plan included hydroxychloroquine, pharmacists across the state of Minnesota had been advised not to dispense it. Now, as long as you said follow the money, I will say this. A lot of folks don't realize that Pfizer, which is a powerful, remarkable pharmaceutical manufacturer, I mean, they've had products that have been just game changers. Z-Pak, Zoloft, Viagra, Lipitor. This is a big drug company that knows how to make money. This year, they will make almost 50% of their revenues on the vaccine alone. I think they're scheduled to make somewhere around $34 billion this year from the vaccine. And that was before the boosters were in the game. So I guess they'll have recurring corporate profit, right? $34 billion this year. Minnesota, in the general fund budget balance, the general fund budget, we will spend approximately $26 billion in the coming fiscal year.
I want to share with you, this is from Monica. They changed my sister's hydroxychloroquine to another med. She has lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. It was working for her. Now she can't get it in Minnesota.
That was originally, I think, put forth as part of the reason that pharmacists shouldn't dispense physician prescriptions for hydroxychloroquine, because there might be a run on it, there'd be a shortage on it, and then people who were using it for rheumatoid arthritis or other inflammatory arthritides would not have it available to them. That did not prove to be borne out. So perhaps that was the rationale for, in August, having this portion of the executive emergency order rescinded. Again, person would have to ask Governor Walz for the specific answer on that.
Kind of two questions in one. Someone asked here, how can a doctor prescribe ivermectin and then the pharmacist not fill that prescription?
Well, I think several weeks ago, maybe even now 6-8 weeks ago, I believe the AMA, the American Medical Association, and the American Pharmacy Association both came out with a strong recommendation that ivermectin should not be prescribed or dispensed for COVID-19. I disagree with that. I would just remind people, if you think back to 1976 with Legionnaire's pneumonia syndrome, and this was where there's an American Legion convention in Philadelphia, and when everybody left the convention, at the end of the convention, people were going all over the nation and going home getting pneumonia, and many were dying. And these patients were not responding to our normal treatment protocols with intravenous antibiotics, et cetera. And what did we do? Well, did we all sit around wringing our hands and waiting to see if we could call Dr. Fauci? Well, of course not. We kept trying, we kept working, we kept talking with our patients, and some of the docs decided to try antibiotics that had previously been successful in different scenarios. And so erythromycin was attempted, and lo and behold, erythromycin worked. So all of a sudden we were able to stop the dying. And it was approximately 9 months later, I believe, that we were able to isolate the bacteria and then do the actual testing. And yes, that bacteria did indeed respond to erythromycin, but didn't respond to, say, penicillin. So we had that opportunity in 1976. Why we didn't follow that same protocol where physicians and patients together have a conversation and decide what they would like to do. We've got these big companies or big entities, American Medical Association, American Pharmacies. What are they doing? Pharmacists on an individual basis are smart, they're well trained, and they should be allowed to do their work. But instead, they've been interfered with, bullied, frightened, and the fear of God has been put in them. And then you see what happened to Dr. Horek, and all of a sudden we're saying, yeah, I can see why these pharmacists are not going to go against the grain.
Unfortunately, Monica says her sister cannot get the hydroxy. So Monica, sorry to hear that. Last question, Doctor, we'll move on to other topics. So we see what's going on in Israel, very high vaccination rates, and yet still cases continue to rise there. There's communities in India that have used prophylactics, treatments, presumptuously ivermectin, no vaccines, and no COVID. How do you explain that?
I can't.
Okay.
I would tell you this. I would say two of the countries right now with the highest vaccination rates in the world, just ballpark, Portugal and Iceland, both have greater than 75% of the population's vaccinated. Two countries, low vaccination rates. South Africa, Vietnam, 10%. So 10%, 75%. Which countries have the higher rate of COVID cases per million people? Iceland and Portugal, the 75%ers. Why is that?
I don't know. And it's not like Iceland's a densely populated area. So what's the answer?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why science sometimes has to breathe. Science has to evolve, and we learn. But I think when we're doing it, I think we should be very careful when we say things arbitrarily and with absolute certainty. And I think we need to be humble and be willing to say, hey, I was wrong on that. I thought that we were gonna be done with it, but we had another surge or whatever.
Let's go back to Dr. Horek in a different angle from the standpoint that I know one of the big conversations right now for people is, hey, they're tired of seeing what's happening in schools. Let's leave it at that. So I know tonight you talked about school choice. Would you propose a voucher system? How would you get that done in the state of Minnesota?
The specific mechanism I would want to leave to the experts in terms of how to do logistics. The bottom line is we need to fund kids, not broken institutions. I think that big, bold ideas to make K through 12 education in the public realm in Minnesota have been lacking for 30 years. I think we need to go out there and allow parents a more profound impact on how their kids are going to be educated. What does that mean for me? Well, if we took a chunk of the money that Minnesota normally puts toward each student and allow the parents to designate where that goes, whether it's to help their kid go to, maybe they homeschool in the morning and they go to a science academy in the afternoon. Maybe they go to a private school. Maybe they go to a charter school. Maybe they go to K through 12 public school, but they do something else. Bottom line is we need a little bit of we need a revolution in the way we educate our kids because it's not working. We have higher rates of mental illness, depression, suicide, anxiety syndromes in our young people. Even before COVID, we knew it was ramping up. Now with COVID, it's like someone threw a whole lot of gas on a fire. But it just isn't cutting it. We've got too many kids going to college, coming out a year and a half later, despondent, disillusioned, student debt. They're no closer to having a clue as to what they want to do in life. We should be providing a menu with greater options. Right now, it's like we have a menu, and all it's got on it is appetizers. There's no entree, there's no dessert, there's no beverages. Let's get a bigger menu, and let's ask kids. Let's ask parents. But the fact of the matter is, teachers go into teaching to touch kids' lives. Let's not forget that. We may at times be angry with, quote, the teachers' union, but the teachers' union politically seldom represents their members. Oftentimes, you're part of that union because it sort of comes with the territory. That's how you get legal representation if you need it. That's how you get your contracts negotiated. You might get a life insurance or disability insurance. But let's be fair on this question.
Your reaction to the National School Board Association suggesting that parents showing up at some of these school board meetings are potentially be labeled as domestic terrorists, and then obviously Attorney General Merrick Garland putting out a letter saying, hey, we're going to start to investigate this stuff. What was your response and reaction to that?
I was embarrassed for the School Board Association. I was on school board for 10 years. I was embarrassed for them.
They have since apologized on Friday, but still, the fact they even went there is shocking.
Well, the apology means something. It does. I mean, the fact of the matter is people make mistakes, and it was stupid on their part to do that. But the responsibility really lies with President Biden going to, Garland, and, the Attorney General going to the FBI. I mean, these are people that are supposed to be thoughtful and measured. These are supposed to be people that have been given tremendous amount of power. And you see this power abused, where the president goes to the attorney general goes to the FBI, as if we don't have enough problems on our southern border, in the Mideast, in Korea, in China, with chips, with the supply chains. And now we have the FBI investigating parents because someone might have gotten raucous at a school board meeting. Come on, folks, keep it in perspective.
Within that letter, the National School Board Association said that critical race theory is not being taught in American schools. Is it being taught in Minnesota schools?
Yes, they're lying.
Okay. Let's talk about safety. I remember we had you on my TV show a while back, and I said to you pretty early on in your campaign, hey, Doc, as you're traveling around the state, what's the number one thing on the minds of Minnesotans? And you said safety. I remember being blown away by that. So are you still getting that same kind of feedback as you're traveling around? And what would you do to make people feel safe in Minnesota?
Absolutely. Safety is going to be one of the top two issues, if not the top issue, I think, in the next 13 months. I think Governor Walz's delay in responding in a strong leadership fashion with the riots in May and June of 2020 still haunts many people. I think it haunts far more than just the businesses on Lake Street or the residential areas around Lake Street. I think cities burned across the nation, and that's on Governor Walz. Had he not been delinquent, if we had not had journalists on TV saying, where is our governor? That's on him. And I think people remember that very well. But I think what we've seen since then is just this unleashed lawlessness invade the streets. It's like water running through our hands and we can't stop it. About 2 months ago, we had a woman literally beheaded in Shakopee, and her carcass was thrown out on the sidewalk. We are seeing the lawlessness bleed out into the suburbs, the exurbs. We're seeing it bleed out into any urban area in the state of Minnesota. And when I say urban, I'm not talking humongous. I'm talking 10,000 people. You've got issues. I think people are also feeling like, hold it. We've helped build Minneapolis. We've taken dollars out of our savings to pay the taxes that allowed Minneapolis to do this or to do this or to do this. They're feeling a little angry. This is just not a Minneapolis problem. This is a Minnesota problem. And they want to hear the engaged voices of their elected leaders. They don't want pandering. They don't want their leaders being cautious and nervous because they're afraid of saying something that might be used against them in the next election. They want to hear the voice of their leaders. What is Governor Walz saying to Ilhan Omar when she says, vote to defund the police? Does Tim Walz think that him saying, I oppose defunding the police is enough? He and Ilhan Omar have fundraised together. They have been side by side. She gets to say defund the police. He says, I oppose that. And he thinks he's said enough. I'm sorry. I'm hearing Minnesotans across the state incredibly frustrated with them. Minnesotans realize that incarceration has to be used as a deterrent to stopping these violent crimes. Minnesotans realize that cops may not be perfect, but they're trying their best. And cops aren't some alien species. They're the people who live next door. They go to church with us. We might run into them at BWW having a beer, watching the Vikings game. These are people right next to us. They might be my brother-in-law. They might be my sister. Come on, folks. That's what people are realizing. They're frustrated and irritated, but they're frustrated and irritated not with the police. They're frustrated and irritated with their elected leaders.
Folks, thank you, everybody that's joining us here right now. We really, really appreciate you tuning into this. And I just want to share something with you that here you've got a gentleman running for governor for the great state of Minnesota. And I'm going to ask you all out there that are watching, how many other candidates do you know they're going to sit down with me or any other reporter for, what are we doing this for almost an hour now, Doc? And be this transparent because he wants to be honest and open and lead this state. So you need to think about that as you start thinking about, okay, who am I going to support? Who am I going to vote for when it comes to the Minnesota governor's race? So thank you for this time and this transparency, Doc. I think the people obviously very much appreciate it. Do you want to share something about that, sir?
Well, I think if we all just step back from the world of politics and just ask ourselves, what should a campaign be? I think a campaign should be sort of a transparent revealing. We have these reveals now where when moms and dads get pregnant, they have a reveal party where it's a boy or a girl. That's sort of what a campaign should be. We should be revealing what we are, who we are, so that each voter can sort of say, the relationship or the connection I have with that candidate is such that I'm going to support that candidate. I'm going to vote for him. I'm going to make a donation, whatever. But ideally, that's what a campaign should be. It should be a revealing. This is who I am. So I'm going to speak to you candidly, not because I'm right on all this stuff, because it may well be that next week I may find out that I was wrong on a couple of things. But I'm just going to tell you from the heart, from my mind, this is who I am. This is what I'm thinking.
Thank you. And that's why I think so many people appreciate you right now, Doc, because I can't think of another candidate that would do this. And so I just wanted to say thank you and acknowledge you for it. So we're here in Greater Minnesota. I think people in this area are going to ask you, so what does a Jensen administration mean for farmers and ag in Minnesota?
Well, let me be a little political here. I don't know why DFL gets to be DFL. I think it should just be D. And that we could just say BS because that's Bernie Sanders. That's really where they're at. They're that far away from us. I don't even know the DFL party today would let Bill Clinton in. I would say this, the farmers belong with me. I would ask you, what has this liberal agenda? I mean, the Republicans haven't had the governor's seat for a long time, so you can't blame us. But what has that agenda done to help farmers keep family farms in the family? How many times have family farms had to be fractured, fragmented, or sold to a corporation in order to handle the estate tax? There should be some form of succession planning relief so that farms can be kept within the families. This is not healthy for Minnesota. What have we done to really connect Greater Minnesota with a robust broadband connection such that we can have smaller cities do incubator programs where small businesses can be run out of Virginia, Minnesota, or Bemidji, or Crookston, or Moorhead, or Worthington, or Sleepy Eye. You can run a business just as well from those cities as you can from Minneapolis. If you're going to be working from home and having home-based businesses, why don't we let's make it happen so that the whole state can flourish? Why do the urban areas get to dictate what kind of an economy Greater Minnesota has, what kind of an economy Southern Minnesota has, what kind of an economy Northern Minnesota has? Frankly, an administration that I'm in charge of is going to be allowing miners to mine, farmers to farm, teachers to teach, business people. You can run your businesses, and I will not tell you that you're not safe, not essential, got to shut down. But don't worry, you can still go to the big box store, buy a bunch of wine, and you can go to the biggest candy store. But don't you dare think you can go to church if you got more than 10 people going. That's not going to be part of my administration. One size doesn't fit all. We're going to look at Minnesota as a diverse geographic state that it is. And we're going to say, you know what? The more local we can keep things, the better off we are. We're going to make streets safer because we're going to have cops on the street. And if cities want to defund their police, then remember this. When it comes time to getting money from the state, think again, because I will use my seat as governor to make certain that if you think you can defund your police and have someone else pick up the tab, you got another thing coming.
Last question, Doc. Someone said here, you said, hey, keep things local. This person asked, what are you going to do to restore small businesses? I would add to that, what are you going to do to solve the workforce issues in Minnesota?
Workforce issues, we are undercutting the incentive to work. There is nothing wrong with the idea that we all need to contribute. We need to contribute. We need to participate. It's part of how we're wired. It isn't just good for society. It's good for our soul. So people are going to work. We are not going to take every dollar given away by the federal government and allow that to undercut the Minnesota economy. Virtually every city I've been in, help wanted signs are all over. Drive through South Dakota, you won't see those signs. They have a fully working economy. That'd be one thing I'd say. In terms of the other part of your question, give me that question again, Chris.
Just what would you do to restore small businesses? And then I think part of that is getting people back to work, right? I mean,
well, I think with this, because let's talk about what a small business is. there's different definitions. But if you say a small business is one that has less than 50 employees, maybe you could put some sort of a cap in terms of its gross revenues in a given year. But first thing I do is any fines administered by the Attorney General during the COVID-19 pandemic would be forgiven. If Governor Walz is going to write a letter to President Biden saying, hey, Minnesota is ready and willing to take on refugees, even if we don't know if we have a plan in place to take care of them. I mean, in Minnesota, we spend on typical welfare recipient $31,000. Iowa, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, none of them get to 20,000. So they're about 18, 19,000. We spend 31,000. If you multiply 275 refugees times 31,000, you get dangerously close to $10 million. So there's mercy, compassion, and concern for those. But where's the mercy, compassion, and concern for the homeless veterans that we have wandering our streets? Where is that compassion and concern for the people that were simply trying to pay their families' bills, keep their business alive? I think one business in the Brainerd area, I think small business, Iron Waffle, has some $35,000 in fines from the Attorney General's office. Where's the mercy and the compassion for that business? You think that business isn't the one that has a couple of kids come from the junior class and saying, would you make a donation for the post-prom party, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the sports, the band, the speech, the theater? That's what these businesses do. They contribute to the lifeblood of their local community. And I think the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, has been way off base, and I think Tim Walz has been right there with them. They have absolutely decimated these people's lives. There could have been a little mercy shown to them. Just say, hey, you know what? We get it. We understand it. We're going to wipe the slate clean. We're going to move forward because we don't want you losing your business.
Last question, Doc. And for people that are asking about election integrity, we talked about that in the beginning of this interview. So if you want to go back to the beginning of this interview, we do definitely talk at length about election integrity. You can hear Dr. Jensen's point of view on that.
Election integrity. Got to have election judges. Got to have poll watchers. Got to win by 10%, not 1%.
Great. Your website, Doc?
DrScottJensen.com, drscottjensen.com. And I would really appreciate it if you think about going to precinct caucuses, because I get it. I will not be the darling choice of the political old guard. I'm not a part of the political elite, never wanted to be. We're not taking any money from Big Pharma. We're not taking any money from Big Tech. But I want that endorsement from the Republican Party so that from May to November, Governor Walz and I can have a debate every month. I'd love it to have those debates on college campuses across the state, but I need that endorsement. And step one is having you go to drscottjensen.com/join the fight. Sign up and let us know that you'll come February 1st and support us.
Great stuff. Again, Doc, thanks for the time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. Please share this video all over social media. God bless you and have a great night.